Welcome everyone. My name is Mirthe. I'm as Claire said, a functional medicine practitioner. Today I will be talking not just about nutrition, actually I will be talking about what I think the 5 basic pillars of health that are super easy to do, and most of you probably already know about them, but I will be telling you a little bit about the background, why they are important, a little bit of the science, so that you might actually want to keep incorporating them and become the CEO of your own health and learn to make educated choices. So before we get into those 5 basic pillars, I'll just tell you a little bit about functional medicine for the ones that don't know it. Functional medicine is a little bit the cross between normal medicine, nutrition, and naturopathic medicine. It is a science-based approach looking for underlying triggers. So it just basically looks at the biology and the biochemistry underlying health and aging or disease, rather than saying this is the illness, let's give this pill. It says, well, what triggered it in the first place? What are the genetic components? What are certain hormonal issues? What are some underlying factors that cause a problem, and how can we fix it? And then there's the second part to it, which is precision health optimization, rather than just waiting for things to maybe happen down the line, let's say Alzheimer's or cardiovascular disease. With functional medicine, we look at certain predictive biomarkers that have been shown to lead to those things and contribute to them down the line, and then to reverse them before they even turn into a problem. Okay, so now we'll get started. You need to take it. No. Okay, so the 5 basic pillars that I'll be talking about today are really basic. There will be what to eat and when not to eat, sleep, movement, stress reduction, and going natural and reducing toxic load. So really basic stuff that most of you probably already know that you should be doing. But I want to really hone in a little bit why they are so important. So science in the last decade or so has focused a lot of its efforts in anti-aging, and as such in things that we can predict and prevent. So there's lots of scientists looking into something called the 9 Hallmarks of Aging, which have lots of fancy words, but what they also found is that actually underlying aging and decline and disease, there are certain factors that contribute to all the different disease profiles, whether it is aging, whether it is cancer, whether it is autoimmune conditions, hormone issues. They all seem to have the same underlying factors, and some of them you probably also heard about. There are things like inflammation, free radical damage, gut health, the kind of balance of gut bacteria, yeast, viruses in our body. Also something called methylation, which tells our body how to turn a gene on or off. Other things like nutrient balance, do we have the right nutrients to do certain things in the body? Also, how much cellular cleanup and renewal can our body do? Do we have a constant load of toxins and our body just gets bogged down, or do we have the capacity to renew ourselves and do cleaning up inside? So these are all the factors that actually down the line contribute to either health or decline and disease, and they all seem to be the same factors. So now that we've talked about that, I'll talk about the 5 basic pillars and why they are important. So the first one is when to eat and when not to eat, and also what to eat. So most of you might know that we should have a kind of a balanced Mediterranean style diet, but why is it so important? So what we eat really matters. Our body, we are what we eat. Whatever we are taking in makes up our body and either contributes to inflammation, to free radical damage and disease, or helps us stay healthy and slow down aging. For example, we need to have lots of good omega-3 fats to lower inflammation. We need to have enough protein to keep every cell going, to make neurotransmitters in the brain, the serotonin, dopamine, keeping us happy and motivated, but not too much to not potentially cause too much growth inside the body. So it's really important to eat our fish and eat our protein. It also is really important to have lots of vegetables, leafy greens. We all know this, but why is it important? Again, leafy greens are really important for methylation. If we don't have enough leafy greens every day or most days, then our body can't decide which genes to turn on, and often it might do the wrong thing, causing problems down the line. Another factor that's really important is to eat our fiber. Again, something that most of us know, but why do we need to eat fiber? It's because it feeds our gut microbiome, these bacteria inside our gut that have been shown in research to either contribute to inflammation, or to health, so they can basically decide whether we have the right kind of chemicals in the brain that make us happy, that make us relax, that can make us focus, or whether it leads to degeneration, decline, anxiety, inflammation. Another important factor is to eat the rainbow, another basic factor. But why is it important? We need all the different vitamins and minerals, again, to make all the different things in our body work well. We need certain B vitamins to make methylation work, to help our genes to either turn on aging and decline, or optimal health. And we want to have all the different ones, so the eating a variety day to day is really crucial to our optimal health. Hi there. And then not just what we should be eating, also when we're eating. So a lot of you might have heard about the importance of fasting nowadays. But there's a lot of research into that, because when we eat all the time, our body never gets a time to rest and restore. You can think of it as if you have children at home, for example, and you want to try and tidy up, it's not possible to tidy up while the kids are running around. So ideally you put them in a different room or outside or wherever you put them to get everything tidied up. Same happens in the body. If you're constantly eating, the body can't actually do its thing and just clean up after itself, get rid of cells that are old, mutated, maybe are not doing their job properly anymore. So we need to give the body rest in periods of fasting. And again, a lot might have known about all this intermittent fasting. Daily periods of fasting is a really good way to incorporate just simple cellular cleanup mechanisms. But it's a double-edged sword, so you don't want to overdo it. So they did a lot of research, again recently, especially in women. If they fast too much, it might throw their hormones off balance and actually cause more damage than good. So as a rule of thumb for most people, fasting until about a late breakfast, early lunch, and then just finishing dinner early is the best, safest way to do for most people. And then it gives the body a nice long rest during sleep to reset and recover. Then we're getting to the next part, which is sleep. Again, most people know you need to sleep, but why is it so important? And there are some people that still think that sleep is kind of a waste of time and you can sleep when you're dead. But sleep is actually one of the most important things as the other 5 factors that we're talking about today. If you have one night where you have a lack of sleep, your body the next day responds very differently to food. For example, when you're eating, let's say, a bowl of pasta or something else with carbs and sugars in it, your body isn't able to respond to it properly because you're getting, on a micro level, insulin resistant, which down the line, if that continues over many years, could lead to something like diabetes, insulin resistance, metabolic syndrome. So that's one of the things. If you don't get a good night's sleep, the next day you're slightly insulin resistant. Also, your body is more inflamed if you haven't had a good night's sleep, even just after one night, but obviously it's fine once in a while not to sleep well. But if it just keeps continuing and accumulating over time, then that turns into a problem. Also, the whole stress response, our cortisol levels the next day after a lack of sleep is different to if we had a good night's sleep. And our response to people, to stressors, to food cues is completely different. We're more prone to binge eating, to be not able to make conscious choices for things that are good for us if we haven't slept properly. And another really important factor is for the people that are worried about brain health and Alzheimer's. If we don't sleep properly, our brain can't do this cleaning up thing again. So when we're in deep sleep, which is a part of our sleep, our brain actually starts to increase the lymphatic system, which drains out anything that has accumulated in there. So all these amyloid plaques that down the line could lead to Alzheimer's, for example. So if we get a good night's sleep, we can clear all of that out. So we have food and we have sleep. Next thing is movement. Most people know that we need to move to stay healthy, but why is it really that important? And is there something that is also over-exercising? So again, it's a double-edged sword. We want to move, but we don't want to over-exercise. And especially in a town like this, people are more prone to over-exercising, where if I had this talk in London, it'd be more that people under-exercise, for example. But we want to exercise because exercise is really important against inflammation. It is also really important to keep our muscles and our body and our cells insulin sensitive so that it can deal with food intake properly. And it is also really important to keep our hormones balanced and our sleep at night well. So it all comes together and it all contributes to each other. But if we, on the other hand, over-exercise and we, like some people just think that the more the better, and they run for 2 hours every day, then that could potentially lead to overexertion, cortisol problems. Actually, the body thinks that it is running away from a tiger all the time, and we'll get to the stress response in a second. But as a general rule of thumb, for most people, unless they're well-trained athletes that make sure they get enough rest, about daily movement, about 30 minutes of something gentle, and then 3 times roughly plus minus, it's different for everyone, of a higher intensity workout, 30 to 45 minutes. Anything more than 45 minutes actually already starts to increase the stress levels in the body, and then it could potentially cause problems down the line if you're just constantly being stressed out. Which leads us to the fourth pillar of health optimization, and it's stress. And again, it is something that most people hear about. People say, well, this person got ill because they were so stressed out. And then people say, oh yeah, stress, blah, blah. But actually, it is really that important. If our body is pumping out cortisol, the stress hormone, our mechanism works in a completely different strategy than if we're being in rest and digest mode. You might remember from biology class that we have these two main sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. We're either in fight or flight or in rest and digest, and it's a switch. Now we evolved to be mostly in rest and digest mode, where the body can restore and heal and do its thing. And then sometimes if there's a tiger or some threat, short time, we go into that fight or flight mode, which is really important, but then it has to go away. Now, if that is skewed, which a lot of us in our society, unfortunately, we have stress from work, from kids, from spouses, whatever our perceived stress is, that can then skew this and actually constantly put us into the fight or flight mode. And if our body pumps out cortisol, it has a different effect on our systems. For example, if there's too much cortisol, our body gets insulin resistant. So again, as I said before, that could down the line contribute to things like diabetes or cardiovascular disease. So none of these is just a one thing that just happens with one trigger. They're all different factors that contribute, and if it continues for 10, 20, 30 years, it might trigger a problem. Also, if you might know this, but we are meant to have a cortisol spike in the morning, and then we're meant to have a taper off throughout the day. So we're meant to have this nice little stressful moment in the morning that makes us alert, and we get things going, and then it should be tapering off throughout the day. And that's the best way for our system to work. For example, they did research that if your cortisol level is high and your blood sugar is low and your insulin, which is tied to our blood sugar, is low, then you're burning fat and you're actually in an anti-inflammatory state. Now, if your cortisol, the stress hormone, is high while your blood sugar is high, so later in the day, then it has a completely different effect on our body, and it actually contributes to accumulation of fat around our waistline, which is not that pretty, but it actually is, you might have heard of this, abdominal visceral fat has been linked to inflammation, and then down the line to things like, again, cardiovascular disease, cancers, heart disease, autoimmune problems. So it all comes back to in this big circle. So it's really important to try and get our cortisol up in the morning, so you can do your high intensity exercise in the morning, you can have a cup of coffee, but then you want to taper it off throughout the day and let that go down so that you can then have a nice night's sleep and get all the rest from your sleep. So those are the 5 basic pillars. And today is just a short talk to introduce things, and then we'll open up to questions, and you can just ask whatever you want to ask. But just a quick note, so within functional medicine, so now you know all these things, and you've probably heard them all before, but how do you know you're doing it right? So in precision health, we like to test these biomarkers. So we like to test for insulin resistance, for inflammation, for cortisol levels, other hormones, and long before they are turning into a problem. So your doctor might be saying, oh, your annual is fine, but actually a lot of the markers are already on one end of the range, and then it could down the line turn into a problem if they constantly accumulate, kind of like the body works like a cogwheel with all these different wheels spinning with each other. And if all this sludge starts to accumulate, then they don't work that well. And after 20, 30 years, there might be Alzheimer's, there might be heart attacks or autoimmune disease or infertility, whatever it is for the person, wherever they have their genetic weakness, really. And the last one, before I forget, the fifth one is toxic load. So another thing that I believe is one of the most important things in our current society is to try and just go natural where you can. And that it means anything from cosmetics to our utensils, rather than plastic jars, glass jars, rather than having aluminum Nespresso capsules, go for a stainless steel coffee maker, rather than heating our lunch in a plastic bowl, put it into a glass bowl. Also, all the different fragrances we put around us, all the different dishwashing liquids that we just consume in tiny little amounts, they all have been shown to damage our system, because our system isn't really, we haven't evolved with those things. They're pretty new in our history of human evolution, and they cause free radical damage, and down the line again just cause the sludge in our cogwheel of our machinery and contribute to problems. Another thing is heavy metals like mercury and tuna, for example, and all of the and synthetic foods. So for example, all the foods that look maybe really nice and shiny, but they have synthetic flavors in them, they have synthetic colors in them. They've been shown, for example, in kids to contribute to ADHD, and because they're blocking certain pathways in the brain, and our body is just not really evolved to do that. So just cutting that out and going as natural as possible is one of the other basic 5 things that I think is most important to do just to optimize health without having to go into fancy things. And then the last thing that I want to say before I open it up to questions is that I believe in the 80-20 rule. So everyone doesn't have to think that just because they want to be healthy, they now have to do everything. They have to sleep 8 hours every night. They have to eat only the right perfect food with no fun in it. They have to exercise just the right amount, all these things. I don't think that's the right thing either, in my opinion, because it leads to something called orthorexia if you're too strict about it, and that then has a bad effect on your cortisol, on your stress response. So actually a little bit of play, a little bit of fun is also really important. So I always think an 80-20 rule roughly for healthy people that just want to optimize health is great. And then if someone has a health issue, they might have to go up to 90-95% temporarily until their system is back in balance. That's it for my talk. And now I'll open up to questions, if you have any.